Ryan refused, because things are already going well, and according to information, Loria is the only one of the Altia which is not linked to Hezbollah, therefore is the only one of this family, which is not among the targets of Raiden Diaz. Considers that this simplifies things, and now they have confirmed that the rest of the Altia will be eliminated. Ryan says that if they proceed according to the order of the Red Moon, will focus on blocking the information so that the case Avalon does not reach Alan. This last one is already beginning to believe that it has a barrier that goes away to the people instant when the redhead greeted him, exciting it because maybe and socialized with the nobles. However, emotion vanished when he realized that it is one of the people powerful in the shadows, someone who served in the game and knows perfectly well that having her around means problems. Anyway, kindly returned the greeting to Kalia Zenania, surprising her as she was not expected to hear from her. Ala mentions that she is quite famous in many ways. And remember that in the kingdom of Asteria, there are 3 great powers in the shadows: Northern Highlands, Eastern Palaciode, and Zenania, the troublemaker of the West. In addition, Kalia is the eldest daughter of Count Zenania, unlike that palace led by a kind of gangs. Zenania is more like a criminal syndicate, intelligently commanded by Kalia. The objective of Alan is to establish connections to live a peaceful life, and for the sake of his goal he should never get involved with it. With much education praised her for her great beauty, and he expressed his intention to talk to him more. If it's okay with you, Alan, who would love it, but considers that there are too many eyes on them at this time. This not to say that he wants me to leave him alone. Kalia already realized that it is such, and as the rumors say, so he said goodbye, wishing to see him again. When he left, Alan was left with some doubts about his attitude. At the same time, Ryan mentions that the information in the case Hazelnut is being contained, but Diaz has a concern. Someone keeps keeping an eye on Alan. Ryan reminds him that there are no new orders, so they must follow, monitoring, and then eliminating any danger on another day. Even asked Alan if this is the place. Correct, since it looks like a simple cannon with nothing interesting, but accepts, which is strangely dark despite being noon. Alan in his mind celebrated because he finally found his real goal, and that delve into the game. Remember that it was easy to find in the game. The reason why he came to the south under the pretext of attending a dance was because of this labyrinth known as the Labyrinth of Whispers. If it solves certain riddles in the 8 rooms, will receive a powerful artifact as a reward, and the good news is that he has memorized all routes and riddles. Upon arrival at the entrance of the labyrinth seemed cooler than he expected, since seeing it in person is totally different from having walked the labyrinth several times in the game. He even doesn't understand how he knew about a place like this. To what they wing, I guess you came here to, often, which confused even quite a bit. Alan inside curses, because he left without thinking, and excused himself by the fact that he was just claiming that he has his own extreme methods of entering. Were being crushed by stone hands, scaring Ivan, because if they get the riddle wrong, that would be the destiny that awaits them. Because of this, it is difficult to understand how Alan can remain calm in such a situation, and is still not used to its actions, despite being 4 years old, working together, thanks to the fact that their missions have no pattern. Does not make much discovery of the mansion, and yet it seems know all about this given place. That just solved the riddle, the first one, and although he finds it strange, the reason he follows Alan is because everything he does, somehow, always leads to a good result, although he is concerned about what he is planning this time. Alan feels he is about to vomit. But fortunately the door has already opened, and in front of them, found an enormous amount of treasures that fortune. Alan ignored it, saying that they will only take that black ring and then they will have to go. Even loaded with gold bars. Is curious to know if that thing is useful, and Alan asked him to leave things in their place, because it will only cause problems inside, because he finally obtained the Oath of Allegiance. On leaving, Ivan became concerned thanks to what he put in front of them. Wishes to believe that this was also seen coming by Alan, since the piles of rocks in the canyon are actually gigantic golem. He thinks this is the worst case scenario, beginning to devise a plan to make at least Alan get the ladder out alive. Took a step forward because this time he will be in charge of everything, mentioning that the escape route is one of the first things that you must plan before entering the labyrinth. the golem began to attack. So Ivan asked him to be careful, since the second-level magic is not enough to cope with them. Alan, with great peace of mind, invoked the Oath of Allegiance, paralyzing time and sending it to a plane astral, which Alan recognizes as a part in which the following appear in-game option windows. A face appeared in the midst of the smile explaining that the Oath of Allegiance is an artifact of the type absorption that allows the user to restrictions are imposed himself in exchange for power. Alan thinks that voice makes this world feel real. Moment when that thing ordered him to speak, Alan said he will always perform Babylon's hand seals by using magic. And the entity asked what it wants in exchange for this refund. Alan reveals that he wants power to distort the laws of the world a little more, something that the entity bragged about without any problems immediately. Alan expressed his second smile, which consists of singing, listen to the words of Babylon and use magic and in return want greater power to defy the laws of the world. The entity remained silent after hearing this request, making Alan get nervous and remember that by choosing the restrictions of hand stamps and words, the greatest possible magnetic attack power can be achieved. Thanks to repeated. He has memorized all combinations used in the original game, so this has to work. The entity granted its wish, asking him to remember the gestures and of a god, also expressed his affection to him, who has just been forgotten. Their will. One thing that Alan does not know what it means. At that time he noticed that the ring was absorbed. What it means, that the restrictions were successfully applied, while the entity warns him that he will be watching him since inherited his will. We then return to the point where Ivan asked him to be careful with the golem, which began to advance with great danger. Alan stared at them, while thinking that the lightning sphere should. Brilliant verse. But now it looks delicious, even though it is pouring all its mana. No matter how much you train, this is its limit, and for that reason it is time to try the pension and the price he paid. In this way he began to recite the songs, causing the small attack to increase in power on a gigantic scale, and then added the stamps to launch the attack at maximum power. Completely understand, stunned even the power overwhelming of that magic, he had a full impact on all the golem, which at first seemed to have resisted, but immediately exploded, leaving a cloud of dust at the site, being a demonstration of power, such a high level that Ivan still can't believe it. Ivan wants to know if he has been hiding his power, something Alan immediately denied, but Ivan mentions that in his 15 years as a mercenary, I have never seen anything of this caliber before, and ask if it was really just second circle magic. To which they all understand that yes. The reality is that Alan also did not know that he would get such results, as he does not remember that the game is like this. The turn-based combat system in Psychedelia the magic could be improved at each turn by means of hand stamps or incantations, and this time it improved lightning magic, chained with 4 incantations and hand seals, something that in the game would take 5 turns in performing. Basically use a configuration set for a large-scale lightning spell, but in addition to that, adds the power of its restrictions that force it to use stamps and incantations for all your magic, which enhances your attacks several times. Yet it is hard for him to believe that second circle magic becomes so powerful, and this definitely exceeded his expectations. Ivan sat on a rock because of how exhausting all this has been, and is curious to know who was the deranged person who created that place now that Alan thinks so. The Labyrinth of Whispers also had another name, the Labyrinth of Palon, and informed Ivan that his creator's name was Palon. This one could not hear it, so Alan did not repeat it to him and said to go back to the east, because there's something he wants to do once they get back. Think of Ivan that he is more diligent than he seems. It might all end. Think about whether you choose a stamp, and that coincides with the attribute of the spell, its power increases, and if you choose the correct spell, their properties are reinforced. That's how it worked in the game. But difference from the game, where only the numbers were uploaded and the images did not change. This time he noticed that the spell actually changes shape with each incantation, despite the fact that your mana reserve is pathetic. Maybe you can see these transformations, because it is especially good controlling mana. That's something you'll have to check when you recover. And in any case, it is a relief that everything went well. Ryan was watching them closely, and then he was moved at full speed until it reached the labyrinth, where he mentioned the era of the gods' forgotten externals and saw the glyphs of the empire on the nave. That was a message from Palon, who said this was for his friend who lived alone and Rhine. Remember that this person was the one that stopped the darkness of the black things while was victorious against the Kilika devoured by the hearts of citizens. But they were all defeated by Palon the Great, or also known as the brilliant emperor. She obtained all this knowledge because it was born with the old library after receiving the great mission, although to their surprise, Alan also has this kind of knowledge. I already knew that he was special because the Bloody Queen, Yusha, followed him, but to know something that was only found in historical records means that the Big Moon, Alan is a friend of Palon's, and he never expected that. Apart from the phrases he mentioned do not even exist in the old library, by which he wonders what exactly the Big Moon is. What is clear to him is that the Red Moon Yusha, yes, he was right and is ashamed to be following blind orders. Even though happiness goes away when he noticed that Diaz has already returned asking him if he got the information. He said no since the Dark One passed away. Specifically, his head suddenly twisted into the air and Ryan mentions that it must be reported for processing. So they both immediately. In Zenania County, Kelly proved that the rumors were true, because he has no doubt that Alan of emotions, and his eyes were as deep as an abyss. Recalls that the famous performer, and certainly the Count of Zenania, is strong and very recognized, but the famous princess, despite the fact that she does not participate in any social event, asked his father if he doesn't find it curious. After all, he is the Count here, and with a wave of his hand, caused his father to go back to work as if it were a lifeless machine. In this way it is revealed to us that Kalia turned his father into it, in order to act as the real head of the family. And that's something no one should know, so he has uncertainty about how Alan realized it. As if that were not enough, it is refused to talk to her, saying that there were too many eyes. Observing what it means that it also noticed the shadows he assigned to follow him. At that time, one of his men arrived to ask him to go and throw him a view of your room, and to do so, he encountered one of his deceased men. The servant mentions, who apparently did not reveal the secret due to the way in which the seal and Kalia were not activated, understood that the culprit left this in his room on purpose. With a smile wonders how he was discovered, and believes that Alan caught a great weakness of his at the time they met. But the truth is that Alan has no idea what is going on with her. In the Duchy of Altia, Gloria Woodland is not someone to be underestimated, because the distinguished one of the underworld has a cold look like his father's. And that made it clear to him that he is the type of person that he must never make his enemy. He was their last hope, but it was to be expected that he would not accept a deal that would cause him great losses, and all because of his brothers who took away all his goods and power. The eldest son is Timilian, the eldest daughter is Marianne, the second daughter is Pyrine, and the second son is Keith. She, being the last, left her with nothing, and has so far survived, thanks to his father's mercy, but no longer knows what to do at this point. Suddenly some servants arrive to inform you something terrible happened to Pyrine and Keith, revealing that they both took their own lives. As such thing left Gloria speechless, as these two would prefer to stab their own family before uninstalling light. So this does not make sense. Nervous question what about his siblings, Similian and Marianne, and soon after other servants, painted for the horror they discovered. It turns out that the two of them too died in an apparent mutual attack, which left Laureate even more confused. The person responsible for this chaos was fleeing from the mansion, being raided, who fulfilled his mission to eliminate them, disappearing from the site in an instant thanks to its high speed. In the mansion, Altia panic ring, especially in Loria, who remembers how Alan told him that good things would happen. Now he understood that this fearsome man was referring to this, and just like him, she became the sole successor to the family, ducal overnight. Although this may be good news, terror invaded his body because he doesn't know what kind of scary demon made a deal. And the problem is that it is already impossible to take a step back. Already exist too many precedents about the end of the traitors. So you must continue by the path he chose when he went to see him at the dance. 2 months later, a person arrived at the mansion, Yahello, to give Alan a package from the duchy. Altia was surprised to see the content, since it was a bottle of wine. Sternenson heard that he was carrying a few thousand gold coins. so he never thought he would see it. Alan found out from a note that this was sent by Loria and not the Duke himself, wondering why I sent him this gift by. Then wanted to know if the servant was safe, that this was for him, to which the subject responded that yes. In fact, the same Duchess prepared it and ordered him to deliver it to her. The latter surprised Alan because it means that Loria, the youngest daughter of Lusoltia, became the Duchess. She, for her part, mentions that 2 months have passed very quickly, saying that after his father's funeral, who died of an illness, she became the Duchess after the succession ceremony. I could not even enter this office before, but the passing of his 4 siblings was as I suddenly found that no one suspected her in the least, as attending the dance was the perfect alibi. At that time, his brothers had eliminated his secret organization, and when she returned to the mansion she was totally defenseless. Then he was quite surprised by understanding that Alan used the situation to his advantage, and on the outside he rejected it without much interest, but he quietly took care of all the work, dirty without anyone noticing. Is a little scary. Think about how far in the future you have calculated Alan and did not even inform him about his father's funeral, because I didn't want to bother him in the least. I will surely take it because it needs the Duchy High for some part of his plan. And although he managed to unite all the organizations, Altia's subordinates will not be enough to match the hidden force. The almighty Alan, at the end of the day, is talking about an important figure of the underworld that elevated its power only through business, and if there is something he has and she doesn't, is the ability to manipulate the political scenario from the shadows. For some reason he needs the Duchy Altia, so she will be in charge of doing her homework, because the distinguished Alan will contact her soon. And with great sincerity, hopes you liked your thank you gift. Her servant from the mansion. Alicia. While Alan was confused because recently, Loria was on the verge of death. And now it turns out that she has become the Duchess, believing that something is wrong. A few months later, it was already 5 years before the beginning of the original story, and he even went where Alan, calling him Count, the protagonist, clarifies that the succession ceremony has not yet taken place, but it gave him the freedom to call it that, which deep down saddens him, because he was not planning to become the Count. On the positive side, he is already disappointed, and now he can take advantage of the maximum advantages of being a nobleman, achieving a balance between work and rest. Even handed him a letter of Yusha,